it was comforting that in 2023, with every form of entertainment available, there are still adults who will go to a basement and watch other adults just like make shit up.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. But we can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do? I'd like to know the things that specifically make you.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Tim Barnes. You are the genre. And in each episode of this show, I ask someone about the first genres that inspired them, the first crafts that they pursued, and how they feel about those first pursuits now. This episode features an interview that anybody who knows me knows how much I've been looking forward to. It's with Zach Cherry, a comedian and actor based in Brooklyn who is in basically everything. You've seen him in Marvel movies, you've seen him in Succession, you've seen him in The Magicians, and you've seen him in one of my favorite shows, Apple TV Plus's Severance, which I think was a new level of performance for this great actor and improviser. And he's also sort of an enigma. That's why I've been so enamored by his work and the mystery around him. Like even on his website, I'm looking at it right now, he has a 2-sentence bio that says Zach Cherry lives in Brooklyn. You can see him perform at the UCB Theater in Chelsea every Saturday night with Goat. You know how improv names are. Goat probably, maybe it still means greatest of all time, but maybe something even funnier. I don't know. And most Sunday nights at ASSSCAT, another improv name. There's like 4 S's in ASSSSCAT. You can also find him on the internet if you're very resourceful. That's his bio. But then you scroll down and it shows a plethora of things that he's been in. So I don't really know if this is the best way to intro an episode with this guy, but I was taken away by how humble he is, how focused he is about the art of comedy, and how sincere he is about the act of acting. So please enjoy my conversation with Zach Cherry. Thanks again for agreeing to do this. We've never met in person, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think just on X.com.
Yeah. And you have one of my favorite tweets of all time, which is just the words oat milk. And when I saw that, I was like, this is a guy that I feel like we're just on the same level.
Sure. It's a good litmus test.
Yeah. Another reason I've been really excited about interviewing you is because in my house, you play a very special role whenever you pop up on TV. Because, and I should put a caveat here, which is that I do not consider myself to be an actor. I rarely ever go out to auditions. But one of the very few times I ever did, which I'm horrible at, I don't know how people do it. Like you go in there and it's so alienating,
it's
and
terrible.
they just want you to record in front of a camera really quick. It was for that Paul Rudd Netflix show where he's cloned.
Yeah.
And so I had already been seeing you in so many shows, but then when I saw that you got the part that I auditioned for, it was such a it was the first time I understood some sense of what my quote unquote type is in the industry. And so whenever you pop up, my spouse, she jokingly says, that's food that could have been on our table.
Well, apologies for yanking that off the table.
But you really are one of these actors who pops up in so many different things. Like there's this new movie coming out about, God, why can't I remember his name? But this idea that he pops up in everybody's dreams.
Oh, yeah, the Nick Cage movie.
The Nick Cage movie. I feel like that is who you are in cinema and on television. Like the different genres that you have popped up in is mind-blowing. Like, would you consider yourself a character actor?
I guess. I think character actor is such a bizarrely loaded term sometimes where it basically means not a hunk, anyone who's a working actor who doesn't look like Chris Hemsworth is sort of by default a character actor. So I guess, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I haven't given it a ton of thought.
Well, why I love it is because it's always this feeling that you are authentically you wherever you pop up. And so I haven't even looked up IMDb. I just have by memory things that you have popped up in. First of all, you're hosting the Great American Baking Show.
Yes.
I think that's what it's called.
Yep.
You've been in The Last OG.
Yeah.
With you've been in The Magicians.
Yeah.
You've been in Succession. You are in Severance. You are in the Pete Holmes thing. What was that called? Crashing. And it all has genuine Zach Cherry energy in all of these roles.
Yeah. Which is funny, which is another reason why I go like, well, am I a character actor? Because I feel like typically that is sometimes used for people who really like fully disappear into their roles. Like where I feel like there are some actors who you almost really wouldn't even know it's them playing two different roles unless someone told you. Whereas, I don't think that's necessarily the case with me. I do think it's me in there.
Yeah. Well, I found in my very brief research before this interview, I was like, I remember he was in Succession. So I like quickly YouTube, like, what was the Succession? It was a couple of scenes, I feel like.
Yeah.
Find this clip that feels like it oddly either sums up what the character descriptions are for your roles or what it is that you bring to your roles. I'm going to play it.
What's your story, Hunky Dory?
Me? I'm an enigma. You can't pigeonhole me. I'm there and then I'm gone. I'm intellectually promiscuous but culturally conservative. I work hard, but I do not play hard. I play easy. Why would you play hard?
Good question.
Does that ring true to you at all? Is there an element of that line that you delivered that feels like, especially when it's like I'm there, then I'm gone? I feel like in so many shows, you kind of like pop up all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that makes sense. It's funny you mentioned getting an idea of what your type might be by seeing that, eventual role in the Paul Rudd thing. And I think I, in some ways, do certainly have a type, but then other times, like a lot of the parts I audition for, when I read the descriptions, they're not me. Like the original conception of them is nothing like me. And so in some ways, my type is just like, I don't know, getting in there in a variety of types. I don't know. Yeah, but it is, it's interesting thinking about that as you continue to like work and get new opportunities and across different types of things.
Well, I'm excited to really figure out what that spark is. And hopefully by the 3 core questions of this podcast, we'll get to this. So the first question is very vague on purpose. It's what is the first genre that you were drawn to? It could be anything, but as long as it rings true to like who you are, what was the first genre that young Zach Cherry was drawn to?
I mean, I guess definitely comedy. Although, I don't know, is that a genre or is that a, I don't know, is that a duel? Is that a thing that's laid over other genres? I don't know. But yeah, definitely comedy. I've always been that's like what got me into all of this stuff.
Was there a first comedian or a show or a type of comedy that you were drawn to? Or was it really just that broad?
Yeah, it's funny. I always try and remember like, because I feel like a lot of comedians, I don't know, I guess I don't know how old you are, but a lot of comedians of all ages will be like, yeah, I would watch every episode of The Simpsons and like record it and write it down or whatever. And I don't really remember having any particular thing that I had a super duper strong connection with. Yeah, I think I just was drawn to being funny in life. And so anything I was watching, the comedic parts of it would kind of click for me. I do remember loving like Bill Murray's like presence. As I now start to think of other people I was a fan of, I'm like, ooh, another one who I
have that same problem. Like it's impossible. Like it's actually the most difficult question that people ask when they find out I'm a comedian is like, who is your favorite comedian? And a lot of them have some bad history.
Yeah, I mean, like the Cosby Show. I know I was growing up, I was a big fan of. So, but truly, none of those things were like touchstones for me. I don't hold anyone particularly tightly, and I maybe don't even remember specific things or specific moments. It was more just I was awash in wanting to listen to comedy and watch comedy, and I watched all the late night shows, all that, but I didn't really have like ones that were mine necessarily.
You said that you just loved the comedy elements of whatever you were into, and you loved being funny in the moment. And I think that makes sense because you have a very naturalistic style. Like even when you appear on screen, it's kind of like you're an everyman, or it's kind of like you are. There's a comedic power in your presence just because you're like, I'm a guy who's just here and you're in my way for some reason. And it feels like you have a life after the scene, actually. And that's a power of when you appear on screen too, I think.
Yeah. And, I think, thank you. And I think, improv is like specifically the form of comedy that I have most dedicated myself to, I guess. Like I started doing that quite young. I went to like a summer camp that had improv classes when I was in middle school ish or whatever. And I do think having done so much improv on stage over the years, one of the skills that I think helps you there is to give your character, because in improv, you only have the scene you're in, but you have to like, in order to make it interesting, you have to bring all that other stuff to the stage and to the performance. So I do think that's probably something that I do, not necessarily intentionally, but just from like, years and years of doing stuff on stage.
Severance is one of my favorite shows ever. And I feel like that was one of the first roles that I've seen you in where it went a step beyond the typical Zach Cherry role. Does that seem right to you? Or a genuine emotion, especially when it came to your character and his son, that I was like, oh, damn, we've entered the next level of the game.
Yeah, definitely. It was not something that I had been given the opportunity to do before, which is a whole other thing in terms of like you were talking about your type within the industry. I do think much of that comes down to what people are willing to let you do and let you try, because obviously as an actor, you are somewhat beholden to the roles you get. Like you don't get to say like, here, I'll do that one. You get to say like, please, please, please let me try something. And so, yeah, I think it definitely was like a new expansion of my kind of comfort zone. And it's certainly the thing that I've been in the most of. Like if you want to kind of clock like, percentage of screen time or whatever. So it definitely is a new widening of my career opportunities. Also, I'm sounding somewhat insane right now, I realize. And I just want to say I do have COVID right now.
Okay.
So my thought processes might not be as crisp as they would be otherwise.
Totally fine. What was your process of getting there? You said that it was sort of out of your comfort zone, and I'm interested because you're someone who describes your comedic presence as casual, and I feel like you're used to bringing that in your roles. Getting into that more emotional, intense, there was anger being expressed. I was like, I feel like it was my first time seeing your angry face.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Well, it's definitely outside of my comfort zone in terms of like paid work that is recorded and broadcast. But, I really do think after doing so much improv over the years, there are a lot of different kinds of improv, but I've done lots of it. And so there are not like emotions or types or whatever that I haven't embodied over the years in one moment or the other. So like, I am comfortable playing those things, but I just haven't had the opportunity to do it on screen before. So it certainly was a little bit of a like, ooh, I don't know, here we go. Like, what's this going to be? But I also think a lot of it helped that, Ben Stiller directed a lot of the episodes. He directed 6 of the 9. He was the one who I worked with at the beginning of the process the most, I think. And so it was very helpful being like, oh, well, here's a guy who is a extremely funny and talented comedic actor, but who also has done all this, dramatic work. I was able to kind of just be like, well, you kind of know how this goes and trust him and that he was putting his trust in me to like do it, that helped a lot to go, okay, well, he kind of knows this, he knows this path. So I can kind of just say, okay, dude.
Well, I'm interested in the things that led you specifically to improv. Then you might have mentioned this already. You said it was part of a summer camp that got you to start doing improv.
Yeah, I did. It was like a performing arts summer camp where you had to, I think the first half of the day was like you were assigned to either dancing, singing, or acting. And then the second half of the day, there were electives. And so there was like a improv elective and a comedy elective and all these things. And so I would always just take those electives over and over, and they would do like, you know, like short form improv type stuff in the Who's Line mold, but also probably some more, you know, experimental things. And I just like immediately kind of fell in love with that and was like super into that.
What was it opening up for you? I get the sense that you don't have the typical tragic comedian backstory where this was your great escape from from maybe it was a difficult childhood of some sort.
Well, you know, I don't know. I mean, I would say, I mean, I guess I would say I am deeply insane, but I guess I don't particularly view it that way. Of like, it was a escape. I do think it was definitely something that was just like, oh, I'm good at this. I feel good doing it. I like getting this sort of like feedback of laughs and of people saying like, hey, that was good. You know, so as a kid, you're like trying to find things that you're good at. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is like fun and I'm good at it and blah, blah, blah. So I think in some ways it really was just that. It was like, oh, here's my thing.
And you genuinely enjoyed that sort of community element of it. Because I feel like that's like, if there is a division, I feel like people hype up this division between stand-up comedians and improvisers. But the thing about stand-ups is that they want the glory of all the success and all of the lows. They want that all, you know, just firmly in their hands. But, you know, did you have any difficulty with the collaborative element of improv? Or,
you know, I would say I've had a roller coaster with that element of it over the years. I think what more drew me to it is the lack of preparation, truly, and that sort of like the high of like discovery of, I feel like when you're doing an improv scene and when it goes like exactly right, there can be times where it almost feels like you have like a superpower or something where, you know, the perfect moment and you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming because I didn't know what was going to happen. And so I think I've always kind of been chasing that high. In terms of collaborating, I think I am overall pretty good at that. And I think that also helps in scripted work. And it has gone both ways for me of I bring that, what I've learned from improv into the scripted work and what I've learned from the scripted work back to the improv and kind of, but yeah, there are definitely times in improv where, because you can't control what the other people are doing, like when you're a stand-up, you're totally in control, you're 100% in control. There are definitely times when I've been like, oh, I wasn't, that's not what I thought we were going to do. But I think having done it long enough that now I've sort of just figured out how to roll with that.
It sounds like you've been doing improv for a long time. Was there any friction with the real world in that regard? Like, did you have parents who were demanding that you do something a little more practical? Or that's what I'm really interested in, because you just are comedy to me, Zach. Like you just and you're an enigma. You know, I'm jealous of everyone who has a Wikipedia page. You have a Wikipedia page that barely reveals anything. I want to know. You're like I have the same feeling about Josh Gondelman, where he's so positive that I just want to find any nugget of bitterness.
Sure. Oh, I mean, I'm not like that. I'm one of the biggest haters out there. I just am not really online in that way. No, my parents were always pretty on board because they're funny. You know, both my parents are funny. They, be like, hey, check out this album, or go to the video store and rent this movie directed by this awful person, not knowing that was what was going on. So they were always pretty on board. The only real moment of friction, and they were 100% right, was I kind of like always knew this is what I wanted to do. And I was like, I don't want to go to college. I want to move to New York and do comedy right now. And they were like, no, you go to college and then you can do that. And so I did. And they were right.
What is the core of that impulse inside of you? Everything you've been describing so far has been, I just casually love comedy. I love finding the jokes. And I think it's just like everyone in their youth has something like this where it's like a lightning bolt. like you just have to do this thing. But why was that all of a sudden for you? Was it just because this was like the thing that you had the most control of, this ability to find the right joke?
I think it was just that I always knew that was what I wanted to be doing eventually. So I was sort of like, well, why am I going to waste time for 4 years, like learning and rounding out myself as a human being when I could be, like, I didn't even, the truth is, and this is why I say they were right. Like, I didn't know what that would mean to like move to New York and do, I had no idea. And I think ultimately it was good because like, it was sort of this lightning bolt of like, I always knew I wanted to do this, but I was able to sort of pursue it more. I don't know if casually is the word. It was more like inevitably. Like I always knew this was coming, so I was able to kind of not feel like I needed to rush it. And so like, when I first moved to New York and was doing improv, I had a 9-to-5 job for like 10 years or something that I just like would do every day, and then I would go to improv at night in my like polo shirt and whatever. So I think it was more just that this was always the North Star kind of, and I knew I would get here eventually. So I just, at the time in high school, I was like, why wait? Why not just get started now?
That's my favorite thing about comedy. Like when I moved to Chicago, when I really started entering the stand-up scene, there were these gods at night who were just like the most amazing comedians I'd ever seen, but I had no idea what they did during the day. And then there was this feeling of this total shift. And it is like being a superhero. Like I remember like Josh Johnson, he was working at like a supermarket or something, but at night he was this like incredibly talented, beyond his years comedian. And it feels like the key, even when I was in that situation of like that tension of like these weird odd jobs during the day and what I was doing at night, it was treating the day job as a hobby and treating your passion as the day job. The next question I typically ask is like, what was the first craft that you pursued? It seems like you were honestly pursuing comedy almost like a trade school in a way. Is this, do you feel like that's what you're doing? Like you were just like, I'm going to step by step, just be doing comedy so that I can progress to whatever this goal at the end was.
Yeah. I think it maybe sort of ended up that way. I don't know that I was ever so intentional about that. Although I don't know if I told my parents this. One of the main reasons that I chose the college I chose was when we visited, they had an improv team that performed every week, whereas other schools, they would, either not have an improv team or like it would perform once a semester or once a month or something. So I guess I kind of was always like somewhere being like, let's get my chops up. Let's like, let's work on this. But at the same time, I didn't like study theater in school. I didn't pursue it formally in that way. But then I knew I wanted to move to New York and take classes at UCB basically because some of the other people in my improv group in college had done that. And then also I knew like, oh, well, when you look at SNL or like any comedy show, everyone on it came up through UCB. So I was like, oh, well, that seems to be the place you go to like either get better or be around the right kind of people, or I don't know. But yeah, I kind of did just know that was, what I wanted to be doing.
Don't scroll away. You Are the Genre will be right back after the break. You Are the Genre is an independently produced podcast, and I usually use this little break to promote stuff that I've been enjoying, stuff that I've done, stuff that other people are doing. Something I did very recently was I was a guest on the Merge Boot podcast, which is a Survivor podcast hosted by comedians Joel Edmonston and Cody Crane. I hadn't watched Survivor in a long time, but in preparation for this show, I watched what was then the most recent episode of Survivor, and I was really hooked on it. And they were so gracious to guide me through what all the games and all the rules were. And I had no idea, or maybe I had forgotten that the show is basically like The Office, but some people are starving and they're stranded on an island. How could you resist watching this? And all the footage is like eye candy. It's crazy. Everyone should listen to that show. My good friend Ian Abramson, who you'll hear in an upcoming episode of You Are the Genre, and who's been referenced quite a bit. Basically, every time you hear the name Ian on the show, it's in reference to him. He has a stand-up special coming out on April 9th called The Heist. I was there at the live taping of it in Manhattan, and it's a really great time. It's great to see him kind of compile all of his greatest hits and some new hits into one epic special. You can watch The Heist on April 9th. You can pre-order it right now on Apple TV, and I hope you do. You know, you don't have to wait for his episode of You Are the Genre to do that. That would be crazy. And you know what? I'm also really enjoying the new Beyonce album, Country Carter. Is that what it's called? Club Carter? Cowboy Carter. There we go. It's called Cowboy Carter. The harmonies are what stick out to me in this album. They're all amazing and they make my brain tingle. And it made me realize that Beyonce kind of embodies what this show is all about. She defies genre. She is the genre of everything that she does. And speaking of which, I saw this tweet by John Baptiste that I found fascinating. He wrote, "This is the moment, y'all, where we dismantle the genre machine. I was happy to produce and write for American Requiem, along with Beyonce and Dion No ID Wilson. When I catch inspiration," oh, this is a long tweet. I'm not going to finish the whole thing, but the whole thing about breaking the genre machine really stood out to me. I think everyone throughout the spectrum of the arts is trying to break the genre machine right now. They're all melding into something new. We don't know what that new thing is yet, but we're all along for the journey. Speaking of going along for the journey, did you know that there is a newsletter component to this podcast? That's right. You can sign up for a newsletter for updates on the latest episodes. If you become a paid subscriber, you can listen to future episodes a week ahead of the normies. And you also get things like monologue type jokes that I write, other text-based interviews, and things like this, things that are just like recommendations, my thoughts on other things. I don't know. It's just a place for my stuff. Get all of the information you need at youarethegenre.com. Now, back to the episode. Where were we? I am absolutely fascinated by the fact that you don't describe anyone that you're emulating at the start of your story. You know what I mean? Like when I started out, there were certain comedians that I was emulating before I kind of figured out what my genuine voice was. And it feels like there's not an equivalent of that for you.
Well, I think in some ways there were and there weren't, but it's just that there were so many and I would move on quite quickly. But, you know, Eddie Murphy, yes, Adam Sandler, SNL, like I mentioned Bill Murray, Conan, but I never had one who was like my person who I was like, man, I'm like obsessed and they're like the best. I would kind of go through phases where I would just rent every Eddie Murphy movie and watch all of them. Or I would, and I would, as a kid, imagine like, ooh, yeah, I'm going to be a stand-up. Like I'm going to be the biggest stand-up in the world. But then I would get closer to that and be like, I actually don't like that and don't want to do that. So it was kind of a moving target all along of, I do think at one point SNL was like a holy grail for me at a certain point. But then again, as I would get closer to it and learn more about it, I'd be like, I think I would actually be miserable there, that kind of thing. So it was always a moving target. I would like move towards a thing and then be like, I don't know if that's really for me. But at the same time, I always knew that I wanted to work creatively, comedically performing. So that was really the main thing, was this unspecific like end goal of that being my career, I think was more what it was.
Well, I feel like in some ways that must be the key to your success, because a lot of people are tormented by the specificity of their goals, but there's something very humble about the vagueness of your comedic goals. Because, there's some people who are like, I specifically want to have a late night show, or I specifically want an HBO special or whatever.
Right.
Do you feel like you have gotten to the other end of the thing that you were searching for, like the high school version of you was eager to get to now? Or is there another ladder that's emerged?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say yes and no. And I do think some of that is just like a philosophy thing of similar to how I was drawn to improv due to its lack of preparation. I think I'm also drawn to vague and shifting goals due to the lack of being able to say I failed.
It's a magic trick. It's a great way to trick yourself into being in a good headspace.
Yeah, I think it's like, and I think a lot of that also is just, I think probably everyone somewhat does that as you get older, and also as you realize like what it would take to achieve the versions of the goals you had in mind as a kid. Like, if what you really want is to, let's say, host one of the 4 late night shows, like the amount of commitment and the specific type of comedy you have to be doing, like, you have to kind of go into a box or cut off certain other things you might be interested in to really just like grind it out doing stand-up sets every night or whatever. And so I think as I would get closer to those things, I would go, I don't love that goal enough to do things that specific goal would require. Yeah. What I like is what I'm kind of already doing. So like, why not just keep doing that? I do think definitely I somewhat achieved the version of what I was thinking of in high school because, like, this is my career now, sort of. For now.
It definitely is. Yeah.
Knock on wood until.
No, it's never going to go away, Zach. You are the guy.
Yeah.
You are the. I feel like you have become a type, like not the type that we're talking about earlier, but like what it means when Zach Cherry appears on screen.
And I certainly hope to continue working. But I think, and maybe this is just part of my philosophy thing too. Of I do feel like it could go away at any moment, and you never know with in this industry, and also like with Chat GPT and whatever else we got going on now. But yes, I feel very lucky in that I have gotten to essentially do the thing that I wanted to do as a kid. There certainly are also now things I want to do that I haven't gotten to do yet. Like, you mentioned Severance being this kind of first time I got to do a certain type of performing and acting, and that's very true. And I certainly want to do more of that. Like the baking show was another new thing that I was like, oh, let me like show this side. So there's definitely new things I want to do. And like, I also haven't really been involved on the creative side of many of the things I've worked on yet. Like to an extent, yes, in that it's all a collaboration. And I think specifically with me, I tend to bring a lot of, let's say, ideas, whether they're wanted or not.
To the set, you come up with you come up with ideas.
I mean, just in terms of like the way I approach, coming from the improv world, I'll just like throw shit out there kind of a lot. But in terms of like fully being on the creative side of a thing that I've worked on, that hasn't happened yet. So there are a bunch of things that I kind of would love to eventually be able to do. But yeah, I think high school me would give a thumbs up.
Do you think that race played a factor in why things are sort of amorphous to you in terms of like there's like a Rolodex of people, and I feel the same way that inspired me in my youth because I didn't exactly see myself in these positions on screen.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I'm mixed race. My dad is black, my mom is white. And also like I grew up fat. I'm fat now. So like you talk about character actors, like that may have had something to do with me kind of like not like particularly grasping on to specific people of like, oh, that's me, like, but I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm biracial passing, so that's one difference between us.
Yeah.
feel like it's worked to my benefit. The assumption that one of my parents is white, I feel like, has subtly helped me in my career.
Well,
which is,
I mean, in terms of in my career and like popping up in a variety of places, I think it definitely plays a factor in terms of how I'm perceived by casting. Like I obviously don't know specifically, but I think that's why I end up a lot of times not playing roles that are written with me in mind, because there aren't a lot of people writing with me in mind, so
yeah, like the specificity of you. Yeah.
right.
Speaking of that, is that in some way a goal of yours, like to get to that point? Or it feels like, that is the future of everything, is that level of specificity. But you are in the the Fred Armisen position. You are in the
yeah. You mean that I could play Obama on SNL?
Yeah, but you would when you yeah. I mean, okay, let's just talk about race a little bit. I'm sure that we're fascinated by it in similar ways. For instance, like the term biracial, it's kind of like a new and exciting word to me, because in my family, it's just like the one drop rule is paramount.
Sure.
If you're black, you're black. But then also, it feels like no one cares about biracial one step removed. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know who you're dating or who you're with, but you as a biracial person, if you have a child with a black woman, that child is just, like, what happens? It feels like there's a whole more complicated conversation swirling around that no one is able to label.
What do you mean?
Well, it means, you're biracial.
Sure.
Do you like the term biracial? Let's start there.
Well, I mean, I use a variety of terms. I also consider myself black, but I like to acknowledge, that I just like to acknowledge the fullness of my identity, let's say.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't mind that term.
Okay, so let's say you have a child with another biracial by the same standard person. And then, you know what I mean? It just feels like, in a way, I feel like the way that I grew up is retrograde, if that's the right way to say it, because it is a part of a system of oppression, the whole one drop rule of it all.
Sure.
But it just means that, Black people have to open ourselves up to this. I feel like there's this strange nuance to whiteness where you are so white that you don't know the specificity of it. Like when you meet white people who don't know what part, that's the scariest thing. Like, I don't know because of oppression.
Sure.
But you don't know the specificity of your whiteness because you've just entered this new realm.
Once you get white, you don't need to ask any more questions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. And I guess, I don't have kids right now. I'm not necessarily planning on it. So I don't have to necessarily label my baby. I don't have to nail it down. But, it is an interesting question. And it's also an interesting question specifically for me in terms of within the career of acting, because, so much of it in how I'm cast does have to do with how I'm perceived, and like there have been some interesting moments, like yeah.
Can you explain one without naming names and not don't say, like, so I was on this set where we're all in cubicles but we didn't know where we were working.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's an ever present. Well, for example, I get cast, like I said, in a lot of roles that I don't think necessarily had me in mind. And so it's also, in terms of race, my racial identity is not often explicitly part of the roles that I'm playing. And so sometimes that's like fine and whatever. And sometimes it's like, oh, it would be nice to have a creative team behind this who is like aware of all of the elements of that.
Yeah. Like how my character is reacting to this exchange with a police officer or something.
Sure, totally. Yeah. Or on the flip side, I think sometimes at least with casting, although not necessarily me specifically, but no comment. But I think sometimes with casting, if the casting team may or may not be white or not black, let's say, they might like cast me as someone's like I just think sometimes non-black creative teams can't they either go like you're I'm not able to articulate exactly what I want to say, but
Do you feel like some of your comedic power comes from the swirl of unanswered questions? Not even just like on screen, but when you enter stage in improv. Like if you are a type of person who could, it's like anything could happen in a way. Or, do you think that's a part of it?
I don't know. I would say the truth is that almost everything that we've discussed today is like more than I've thought about it. Like or at least more than I've thought about and tried to articulate, so
Yeah.
and I think that is like I think that's why improv in general is entertaining for those who think it is. Obviously not everyone enjoys that particular art form, but I think that element of like truly anything could happen is what makes it interesting. So yeah, I think I probably try and bring that to everything.
And to bring it on, I'm glad that at least I get this feeling that you're going to have a lot of food for thought after this, or you might forget it after a COVID fever dream. The last question I typically ask is like, what is your relationship with the craft that you first pursued? And do you agree that the first official craft you pursued was just comedy?
Yeah, although, I do think at various points I thought it would be different forms of comedy. Like I was interested in stand up, I was interested in this or whatever, but I do think like comedic acting is probably the thing that I was ultimately most interested in and is, what I do most frequently now.
So it sounds like you tested out a lot of different types of comedy, had a laser focus on improv, and it sounds like you still love improv.
Yeah.
Or like, what's your relationship to it now? Are there elements of it that have changed since you started? Are there elements of it that you don't like? Do you feel like you enter the improv space in the same way? And I guess also, sorry to pile so many questions on top, does it get more difficult as you pursue these other, career elements?
Somewhat in that when I was like really pursuing it, I was doing it so much. I was like, I would perform at least like twice a week, and then I would also have like practice 2 or 3 times a week and get like feedback and be thinking about it in a very specific way in terms of trying to improve my skills and those kind of things. Whereas now I don't do that. Mostly because, when I'm working, I get busy and then I still perform quite often and regularly, but I do somewhat miss that like analytical approach of like, here's where I'm at now. How do I improve? How do I not fall into creative ruts? How do I blah, blah, blah. And so I do kind of miss that, but I do very much still love it. And when I'm like on stage, still really kind of just like have fun doing it.
So you kind of miss that feeling of being like absolutely 100% fully engaged with the craft. But what's great is that it seems like you know how to comfortably bring those elements to the other things that you do when you're on set. You mentioned that like you have interest in writing and doing certain things behind the scenes. It feels like you probably find a lot of comfort. And I know like a lot of comedians, like especially during this like strike year where not falling back, but just like the ability to like go to this other thing that's never, for the most part, unless there's another major outbreak and we're all in lockdown, that's never going to go away. You're always able to get stage time somehow, if it's an open mic or if you're booked on a show. And so with all the uncertainties of the industry. So I'm curious how you felt in 2023 with the strike, the multiple strikes, where this path that you've been like consistently doing and like doing more of, suddenly, you're beholden to this machine that's broken, and you were doing more improv, I imagine, during these strikes.
Yeah, it was nice to be able to get back to, because like I said, I had been doing less of it because of work. And so it was nice to be able to get back to. It was nice that it's like, that'll be there. One of the obviously big things of this recent round of strikes was the existential threat of AI of like,
Yeah.
oh, what if we get to the point where someone can just like take out their phone and say like, make me a movie with this, this, and this, and watch like a 2.5 hour movie that's as good as, something Hollywood would make. It was comforting that in 2023, with every form of entertainment available, there are still adults who will go to a basement and watch other adults just like make it up. And it's like, it's as low tech as you can get. It's a form of entertainment that has been around presumably forever, essentially,
Yeah. It feels like the one part they didn't show you of Zion in The Matrix is all the people.
They did not at all cover the long form improv groups that were going around asking people to come to their shows. And we're being like, can we get a suggestion?
Yeah.
I'm Nia.
Well, everyone else is having an orgy dance party.
Yeah.
There were a core group of real worlders just doing some fun improv, doing some zip zap zop.
I mean, you saw the type of people at that orgy. They do improv. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but truly, I did find that comforting to be like, oh, like people want to watch people do things. So that was nice in this strike moment.
Nice. Do you know that Paul Giamatti has a podcast?
No.
He does, and I love it. It's just him talking with his friend who's like a historian or something, and they love learning weird shit like about science and whatever. But he said this this really interesting thing about like how often people don't realize that when you're on set, everything is just like shot in bits and pieces, and it's like a close up, and it's like. But he said, no one knows. I'm doing all this interesting stuff with my legs that no one sees. And he was talking about that in reference to like how much he appreciates the moments when he can like do a play or something.
Yeah.
You're just like fully, it's not chopped up through time.
Right.
And constructed into what you end up seeing. It's like genuinely happening in the moment.
Yeah, I appreciate that as well. And it's like, yeah, there's something almost magical about it, about live performance of any kind. It's like, yeah, it's different.
I guess the last question is, do you have any things that you've learned in this journey of being the genre that you truly are? Zach Cherry is a genre in and of itself. What are some of the key factors that got you there?
Well, I do think one thing that has helped me is not being super concerned about like doing things the right way and kind of just like doing things the way I find interesting, I think there have been a lot of times where people I've been around have been like obsessed with, well, the way to get this part is to like do this thing and to have this type of headshot and this kind of, and I've always kind of just been like, I don't know, maybe I can just like do what I want to do, and then either I get it or I don't. But either way, then at least I'm doing what I find interesting. So yeah, I think that's a big one. Is kind of just like, don't be super concerned with doing things the right way, or like, I'm not on Instagram. I'm barely on X.com, and I will only refer to it as its legal name. Which is, I think, a lot of actors do kind of stress out about, of like, I have to have like a brand, I have to have a presence, I have to like connect, and maybe I should, and it would be better, and my career would be better if I did, but I don't know. I'm just kind of like, let's just do it the way I want to do it, and then whatever happens, happens. So that has been, I think that's been overall good for me.
That's good. So you don't have this thing about you where it feels like, I feel like you don't talk to your reps or whatever about how to like construct the next path of the Zach Cherry brand. Like I was watching this thing where it was like The Rock, where they explained that The Rock at one point sat his people down and said, I want to sort of emulate my career after Will Smith's.
Well, maybe starting tomorrow, I'm gonna see what I can do in regards to emulating Will Smith specifically. No, I mean, truly, and I think, this is probably also how I end up being in such a maybe bizarre variety of things. my only real guiding principle is like, is it interesting? Do I think it will be fun? And is it like people that I want to work with? Now more that I like maybe can have different opportunities, I do want to try things that I haven't done before, like that type of thing. But beyond that, I don't have a real plan.
That's beautiful. This has been a great conversation. Thanks again for doing it. And I hope that you get some rest. I hope this COVID gets out of your system quick.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm just, not making sense.
Big thanks to Zach Cherry for being on the show and for braving through it while having COVID. For the record, we record this over the internet. We weren't face to face. That would be crazy. For more information on Zach Cherry, visit zachcherry.com. Freddie Nunez created and sings the You Are the Genre theme song, and Adam Smith produced it. Journalist Madeline Moitozo joins me next episode. But if you become a paid subscriber to the newsletter, you can listen to it a week ahead of the normies. This is Tim Barnes signing off with your weekly reminder that you are the genre.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do? I'd like to know the things that specifically